I was a partner in the Lampifier Microphone Company from about the mid-2000s when we started the process until the company went out of business in about 2015. And the reason that it went out of business had nothing to do with the product itself. It's a great product, and we had patented technology. It works very well, and frankly, there's nothing else quite like it that's on the market, to the point that for a live vocal microphone, you can't find anything that'll even touch it under $200. And these are super cheap, and I'm clearancing them even cheaper because I have the last remaining stock. What is it about these mics that made them different? Well, we have a patented circuitry. It's non-digital, it's an analog circuit that is a dynamic reduction circuit. So it is a compressor of sorts, but it doesn't work the way normal compressors work, and that's the difference. This is the Model 111 mic, and I've pulled the circuit out of it. It's stuffed up here inside the handle, and of course it's taped up because you don't want these electrical connections touching, the metal of the handle. But basically, this thing, take that off, you can see that there are jumpers here, and these jumpers will configure the gate, the built-in noise gate level, and the amount of compression or dynamic range reduction that is happening. Then this gets stuffed up inside here, and the thing here just closes in the end, screw goes in, and it's basically set it and forget it. And the thing about this circuit that is so different is that it's actually an optical compression circuit. And you might know that with all of these modelers and software modelers of compressors and so forth, these old opto circuits are really, really sought after because they are natural, they're warm. Well, that's what this is. It literally has a tiny lamp built into it, which is why the company was called Lampifier. And that lamp has a certain kind of resistance quality to it. And what ends up happening is as the signal passes through, that the resistance is harnessed to create the compression ratio curve. And the result of this particular curve is that it's kind of an S curve where the ratio on the high end, it compresses a lot. So as things get really loud, compresses harder. In the middle, it doesn't compress so much. It's a lower ratio. And then at the bottom, it compresses hard again. And what ends up happening is that the dynamic range gets reduced, but it's still effectively the dynamic range. And this is really important because as a singer, if you're trying to sing and you have top-down compression, the harder you push, you don't get anything more out of it. And a lot of times this will cause singers to kind of blow out their voice, or they won't be able to work the mic in a way that has the dynamics that they expect because the dynamics are no longer real. And what the Lampifier circuit does is it reduces these dynamics and it tames the plosives and it brings up the subtle details, breathiness and that sort of thing. But yet, as you sing, it still has dynamics. It still offers you a realistic range of dynamics. It just does so within a smaller range of load of soft to loud. And the beauty of that is that in sound reinforcement, we're always reducing dynamic range. Compression is absolutely vital in a mix to get your mix strong and loud. And even in a live environment, singing with one of these mics, it will allow you to have a hot enough signal so that, the singer is in his strong chest voice, pushing hard, it tames that. And then in a soft part or a lower part, it'll bring it up so that he's not buried in the mix. And that's a real problem in live performance, sound reinforcement, especially in a rock band situation or metal. When you have a dense sonic environment, you need to keep those vocals at a level that will be hot enough that you can hear it. So this mic does that. There are two models, and both of them have the same circuit. They accomplish that goal beautifully. This is the Lampifier Model 111, and it's basically modeled after a Shure SM58, which is what this one is. This is the workhorse of the industry. It's a rugged mic, and it has the EQ curve that works because it's got upper mid-range a boost, and that cuts through especially dense mixes. So we're going to compare these in a minute. But this mic is modeled after that Shure SM58 in many respects. Similar EQ curve. But of course it has this added benefit of this what I'd call smart dynamic control. Now a lot of times people that don't have a lot of experience with microphones or not singing much live, they might sing into something like this, and it's like, well, it sounds good, but they don't really notice the compression so much. And that's a good thing. That's actually the way it's designed. It's not supposed to change. It's supposed to be transparent. It's supposed to still sound like the microphone and sound like your voice, only better because it tames the loud and the quiet. It puts it out in a more usable range so that when it hits, the front of house, you might not need to do anything at all to it. No compression, leveling, you just, sing into it and there you go. It's within the ideal range. And this is the other Lampifier. This is a 711 mic. It's a larger diaphragm, and it has a different EQ curve, basically. This one, it has more low end and more high end, and it doesn't have that mid-range boost. So this one's going to sound a little bigger. It would be better for maybe for voiceover kind of work. It would be better maybe in a style where your mix is not so dense. There's not so much competition. Like when you have a lot of gain electric guitars, it swallows up the mix and only the peak things can kind of cut through. Well, for that, you're probably going to want this EQ curve, the SM58 curve. But if you're doing acoustic music or just more open, softer music, this one's probably the way to go. Well, let's do our comparison real quick. First of all, let me show you what I got going on here. Here's the channel with the 58, and I'll select it. The gain is set at 30 dB. Everything else is flat. If I go to the next one, this is the Lampifier 111, same gain, everything's the same, except I've got 48 volt phantom power turned on because you need phantom power to run these Lampifier microphones because of that onboard circuitry. And then here's the 711, same settings. So this is A being mic to mic, exactly the way they sound. All right, so this is the SM58. And it's a cardioid pickup pattern, standard stuff. You've got the proximity effect. The closer you get a little low end there, and then you back away, it gets kind of thin. But the main point here is this is raw. There's no compression on it at all, so it's raw, it's dry, and it just kind of sounds like what your voice sounds like when you're that far away from your mouth. And so the plosives are harsh. If I hit a P pretty hard, it pops. And then, of course, if I were to get, quiet and talk more softly, it's there, but of course it's getting pretty quiet. Now, obviously, when this is all said and done, I'm going to run the whole thing through some kind of leveling and compression to pull all the levels up for the video. So there actually is going to be, some dynamic processing on top of it, but that's of course going to be the same for everything, so you're still going to be able to hear the difference. Here's the Lampifier. As you listen to this one, it's going to sound a little bit different. It's going to sound a bit smoother. It's going to have a little bit more clarity in the high end. The low end is going to be controlled. Even if I get close on the mic and it thickens up, it still has the clarity and the presence because you don't lose the high end. This is the nature of the way the compression circuit works and the way it affects the EQ. So it's a really good sounding mic, and you'll notice it's also hotter. We bring the levels up. Even if I talk more softly, it's still going to come through, pretty strong. And if I hit hard with the P, if I hit a strong plosive or something, then, it handles it much better. You're still going to hear a lot of the same issues. The dynamics are still there, but you're not going to have as much of the problems. And that's the point. That's what we're trying to do here with this microphone is we still want to give you the dynamics that you need for live performance. We just want to get things within the range that makes it work a little better for sound reinforcement. And this is the Lampifier Model 711 mic. It's a different EQ curve is the biggest difference. It's similar in that it uses exactly the same dynamic reduction circuit as the 111. But the difference is it's a larger diaphragm, which has a couple of different implications. But one of the things it does is it allows for even higher sound input levels before it creates a problem. So it actually works well on, miking loud instruments, guitar, for example. You can do that. But really, it's mainly intended as a vocal mic. This mic is a bigger sounding mic. In other words, through the upper mid-range, it's relatively flat. You got a little upward bump at the highest frequencies and then an upward bump in the lower frequencies. So it's deeper, it's bigger sounding, and it's also got a little extra crispness at the top end. And it's good, therefore, in styles or mixes where you want the vocal to sound bigger and it's not competing so much with the other instruments. So, acoustic or just maybe a mix, a style that has enough open space so that you'll be able to hear the nuance and you're not fighting for space in the mix. And just for fun, back to the SM58, which sounds pretty weak and anemic. So those two mics were the first two products, and we won Best New Product at a couple of award shows. Things were going pretty well, and then we went to develop this product. This is called the Model 571, or the Infinite Direct Box, and it's really more than a direct box. It's a preamp, but basically it gives you the ability to connect almost anything to anything and have a lot of control of the sound shaping in the process. So here's the input side, and what you have is a standard line in or XLR in, which normal direct box stuff. But there's a couple of things that this has in addition to that. It has a 1/4-inch piezo input here in the center. Piezo pickups are common in acoustic guitars sometimes. They have a very, very high impedance level, though, so that can kind of create some problems going into most direct boxes. So this has the piezo input here, and when you are in here, this switch will allow you to select a different gain structure for piezo pickups, because some of them are a lot hotter than others. So there's that. Then, of course, you've got your XLR, your standard XLR input. This will pass phantom power. If you have a condenser mic or a Lampifier mic and you need phantom power, this will pass phantom power, provided that the box itself is powered with the 9-volt 300 milliamp connection here. There are other ways to power the box. You can put a battery in the thing, 9-volt battery will power it, or you can power the box from phantom power coming to the output. The output here is an XLR plus 4 dBu going to, professional mixing board or something that would pass phantom power to here. However, I should say that if this box is powered by phantom power or a battery, it will not be able to pass phantom power to a mic. It will pass phantom power to the mic if, like I said, it's powered here. Now back to the line in here, the 1/4-inch jack. This is a tip ring sleeve, or it can also accept a standard 1/4-inch two conductor, just tip and sleeve. And you have a choice. This up here is a mix, and what that does is it allows you to plug in two inputs, so like a stereo, let's say from a keyboard. Live, usually we play, we're in mono, so there's no reason to maintain the stereo. And you plug in both sides of the stereo, though, because maybe you want both elements of your stereo sound. And it'll allow you to plug them both in and mix them together so it sums and comes out in mono. Here, on the downside, it becomes a through. And what that means is that it will tap the signal and put it here, which means that you can run out here and, let's say, run onto another amp or something if you wanted to hear. Let's say you were a keyboard player and you had an input here. You could output this to your amp and then also output to the mixing board or something. If you were plugging in an acoustic guitar pickup or bass guitar, you could do the same thing. You could tap the signal, split it, send this to your amp, and also send the signal to the to mix or front of house, going through all of the features on this to shape your tone, which is what I'll talk about in a minute. But there's one more thing you can do here, and that is use this as a load box. It'll accept up to 100 watts, so up to a 100-watt amp. Now, I wouldn't push it if you have, a 100-watt head. Some of these boutique amps and, modded Marshalls are capable of putting even more power through than they say. Say it's a 100-watt amp. Sometimes they'll do even more. So if you have a high-powered amp like that, I wouldn't be running that amp very hot. You wouldn't want to be turning it up too much because you'll probably fry this if you put in a lot of power. But what the load box means is that you can come out of your amp head, your powered speaker out, and instead of going to the speakers, you can come here, plug in here, run the through, and then tap off of this. You can run back to your speaker cabinet. So you can run the speaker cabinet, but you can also tap and run through this and go direct to your live recording or front of house. Now, you don't have to run your speaker cabinet, and this is useful if you're talking about recording. So maybe, you plug into this out of your amp head, and then you can run through all of this and come out with a somewhat tamed, smoother, processed sound. I don't know if I like the word processed so much, but, EQ'd, shaped, and dynamically controlled sound. And you can record to, let's say, in a home studio without hearing your speaker in the room. And that's important because, not only do you probably have neighbors that probably don't really care to hear your guitar super loud, but in addition, if you're hearing your guitar in your room as you play, then you're not really hearing what you're recording. And this will solve that problem because it'll come out. There's also the USB out, so it'll come out either 44.1 or 48K. You can plug that into your computer, and you can hear what your amp head is doing and record that and listen to it in the mix coming through your studio monitors. So you're going direct. But with all of that being said, what it probably is used for most is, just either plugging a dynamic mic or a condenser mic in and taking advantage of the Lampifier dynamic compressor circuit and EQ. So whether it's a vocal mic or if you want to plug, it's great for acoustic guitar. This compression works really well for that, and you have the EQ shaping for an acoustic guitar or electric or even a crunch tone. And it's also really good for bass guitar. So a bass guitarist could, take their instrument and this thing and just run direct right into a PA system and have pretty good control over your tone and get a good sound. So now let's go through all the details of what this thing actually does when you get into it. First of all, you have this switch here, which will lift the ground or allow it to be grounded or allow it to pass 48-volt phantom power. When you're passing 48-volt phantom power, the unit is always grounded. Next, you have input level. And here we have a huge range. A lot of direct boxes will give you a pad to drop maybe 10 or 15 dB. This one actually gives you two levels of pad. You can come in direct at 0, or you can drop at 15, or you can drop at 30. And you also have this rotary volume control on top of that, 0 to 10, so you can dial in your input to get it exactly where you want it to be. Next, after the input section, it will go either to the dynamic control, this is the Lampifier circuit built into this thing, or it'll go to the EQ section down here. And what will control that is this switch here. So here it's on mute, so the thing's turned off. If you go here, it will skip, the arrow down will show you we're moving from this section down to that section. And if I go to the far side here, it'll tell you, the arrow will say we're going here. And then you run into the Lampifier circuit, which is basically the input level. This will control the amount of gain reduction, how hard the signal is hitting that Lampifier circuit, and then this is the output level from this section. And there's, of course, peak indicators at each point just to make sure that you don't overdrive it at any point. So then it's going to go down to the EQ section. This is a cascaded series EQ. It's a high quality EQ. You have a high shelf and you have a low shelf. So, treble up here and bass. But you also have a couple of other options. You have a presence control, and it works very much like the presence control of, let's say, a Marshall amp or something, where it's upper mid-range and it's a wide band. So between those two things, you have quite a bit of control over the shaping the high frequency. Then on top of that, you've got a sweepable midsection. So that's this one. This is plus or minus, and then this is the frequency. This is going to go from, let's see, 400, so really low mid or high bass really, all the way up to, looks like 1.6K. So there's your sweepable mids and the amount of that. Then we have an upper bass area. So this is really important, especially in bass guitar and acoustic guitars, where sometimes you want some low end in the thing, but when you turn up the low end, there's going to be boominess in one frequency in particular. The idea here is you can raise the bass shelf, and then you can find the frequency of the boominess and notch it out. And for that reason, this is actually not written in terms of frequency of hertz. It's actually the fundamentals of the notes. So this is a G, G sharp, A, B flat, C, D, E, F, all the way through. So you've got basically an octave and a half here, and it moves from the upper bass frequencies all the way through. I'd say the G is probably, around 100 maybe. I know A is supposed to be 110 when you tune standard A at 440. The low A on a guitar, the fundamental frequency then is 110. It's 2 octaves under the 440. And so that would be here. And so this, again, it sweeps from, maybe around 190, I don't know, maybe 98 or something, all the way up past the octave to probably around the 400 range. In any case, you got the same thing, cut or boost, and then down to here, you've got the low shelf. From here, it passes to the last module in the unit, which is the speaker simulation. Now, if you want no speaker simulation, you put it here and it's direct. Also, there's another switch here that is phase inversion. If you need to do that for any reason, you've got that covered. But direct, well, that's obviously what you normally get out of a direct box, direct sound. But since this can be used as a load box, or sometimes if it were for a bass guitar, for example, and you're using it as a preamp, you can use the speaker simulation. And there are 2 different cabinet simulations here, combo or a stack. Well, the combo is modeled after an open back cabinet, kind of frequencies that are common there. And then the stack, of course, is a closed cabinet like a 412 or that kind of thing. And so you've got those 2 options. And then, of course, you've got your final output level. Then it comes out the back. This is plus 4 dBu, goes to, a mixing board, professional level. Here's the digital out. This is the power in. And here is line out. And line out is controlled, again, by the volume control. So there you have it. This thing can do a lot. Now, some of you might be wondering, if these are such great products, why did this company go out of business? Well, of course, that's because great products don't ensure success. I mean, a lot of companies have great products, but, the products have to be marketed and you have to have enough money. A lot of things have to go into making it work. And frankly, in many cases, you see that the market is dominated by products that aren't great. Microsoft Windows, case in point. But I will give you a quick explanation of what happened. Basically, we got put out of business by the larger microphone companies because at the time that we were doing the NAMM shows and getting distribution going. We had great reviews. We had lots of musicians that loved the product and were using it, but we really couldn't get the word out to enough people fast enough to create the demand so that the big chains like Guitar Center would want it, because of course they don't want it unless people are asking for it, and people aren't asking for it because they don't know about it. So we were trying to grow organically, and it really didn't work because the old distribution system, at least that was still active at that time, there were a lot of independent reps that would go around to the stores and show new products. And we found a lot of independent reps came to us and said, oh, wow, this is revolutionary. We love this product and we think it'll do really well. And then they'd call us a week later and they'd say, we can't carry your product because Shure told us that if we did, they would cut us off. And Shure is the bread and butter, and they sell, hundreds of microphones. They couldn't afford to do that. So they weren't going to leave Shure to take us. Shure basically prevented us from getting any independent reps. And so the long and the short of it is that we bumped along with a website and, selling products, trying to let some people know that we existed. And we did have a number of very happy customers for a number of years, but it really never generated the kind of increase that we could pour back into the company. But the good news is that I've got all of the remaining Lampifier stock here, and I'm making it available. So, I've got the prices slashed from where they were, everything's cut in half of the price that we were selling it for, and the price that we were selling it for was actually already less than the retail price. So it's highly discounted, and I think if you have any interest in this kind of a product, if you're using these for frankly for live, they were really intended mostly for live performance, but they work really well for recording as well. Now I understand that a lot of engineers, as they record, don't want to record with a lot of compression. And I'm one of those people too. I tend to want to take the driest signal, that I can get and the most raw signal, because then I can do whatever I want with it. But in many cases, putting a light compression on vocals as they're tracked is a very common occurrence. And a lot of people want to do this even at the highest level studios, because they know that you've got way too much dynamic range and we need to tame it down a little bit. So they'll put a little bit on it just to begin with, so that then they can tweak it further as they mix. There's nothing wrong with doing that. In fact, I've recorded with these Lampifier microphones as well, and they work quite fine. So if you want to test out one of these microphones, you can come to my website, troystetina.com, and click the shop button, and you're going to see them there. You can see all the information there about them, and download it or whatever. Look at the sheets and so forth. And if you go for it, I think you're going to be pretty happy with what you get.